at camp. We did another PCR on site. We did that for both our campers and our staff. We were very fortunate in the sense that they all came back negative. We had just one child show up, actually a young adult, that didn't have the PCR done in advance. We made a decision on the spot based on a number of variables, some of which I can go into if you want me to, but I don't want to take up time with it. But we quarantined her. We made the decision to quarantine her, and we did the PCR on site, and that it came back negative, and then we were able to integrate her with the rest of the population. We did masking, both modification within our pods or our cohorts, as well as beyond. But honestly, all the contingency plans that we put in place that we felt very equipped, fortunately, we didn't have to execute a lot of them. It just felt like normal camp in many manifestations. And I think we're all planners, and a lot of us are A-type and alphas, and we want to get it together. But at the end of the day, camp is camp, and it felt phenomenal to do it. Abby, anything beyond that?
I would just our numbers were down from what we normally have. So I don't know if everybody else has been encountering that. And it kind of provided some, it was kind of disappointing, but also as we got there, we're kind of this feels a little more intimate with everybody. And, but I think that kind of helped us too, just to manage everything.
Awesome. Hey, can I ask you a couple of questions, Mark and Abby? You said you required everybody to have a PCR before they arrived.
Correct.
How long was it taking you to get the results back from that? Because we decided against the PCR and went with the rapid test for everyone on site, vaccinated or not, because of the turnaround on the PCR.
Yeah, we debated that too. I think, and you can go obviously different paths. I think if you're doing a large sample size of more than one, even if it's two, even if you're going rapid, we did have some campers that were vaccinated in advance too. So we knew that information kind of leading into it. We went with PCR just because the rapid sometimes isn't as reliable. And we did have, not every state's going to have the luxury of having a lab that was bought in over a holiday weekend, that as soon as we ran them from point A to point B, they were willing to put us at the front of the line, get all of our stuff through, and we're good to go. We found in our state, Abby was a rock star with this process. And also I'll introduce it, and Abby, you can elaborate. So we contacted our state fire marshal, and he connected us to, basically an Indiana website that had all of the locations of where the PCR could get done. So a lot of that was communicating with families. Instead of just saying you got to get it done, we actually gave them physical locations. We had to call those locations in advance to make certain that they were still open, because a lot of things have changed in the past several months, and the vaccinations have rolled out in Indiana so fluidly. I mean, they've done such a great job. Prior to that, some of those places were getting slammed, and the lab work time of getting back was not within 72 hours. So due to the nature of the state of Indiana, due to the nature of the locations that we sent them to, we also suggested against going to a CVS or a place that wasn't a one-stop shop, because some of those places, they contract another, or there's an employee that runs that stuff, the labs, that they call on sick that day, then you're going to have families coming back and saying, we didn't get our results in time. So we went through the company that was contracted through the state of Indiana that does everything. So Abby, you definitely know a lot more about that than I do, if you want to elaborate with that.
Yeah, so you're definitely lucky that you had a lab to help you. Go ahead, Abby.
Oh, no, I was just going to say with that too, I think it's probably even changed since we were contacting our families. I think a lot of those testing sites have closed. I know that actually that company they contracted with, they're closing every single one of those sites. And even as me and Val, our third person here, she and I were the ones who were kind of divided up that that legwork of contacting all those places. Between the time she contacted one of the places and contacted the families, it had closed. So I wonder too, if as time goes on, you might run into a little more scarcity as far as finding testing sites, depending on when your camp is, if you're looking at advanced stuff.
Right. Yeah. So that was another reason. We are kind of out in a rural area, and right now the camp is saying that once you come on site, you may not leave. And so we would have actually had to have had a third party come in and get those tests, take them and do all of that. And again, so that's why we went with the rapid test. One more question. What percentage of your staff was vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and what percentage of your, your 12 to 17-year-olds?
I was told there'd be no math, so I won't give you percentages as much as I'll give you like raw numbers. So we had roughly about 60 volunteers, 59 probably to be exact, that were on-site volunteers at camp. All but I think 5 were vaccinated. We did have a very healthy, robust, and interesting conversation on a board level from where we would mandate to like heavily suggest. Fortunately, our board empowered me to allow basically rare exception to the vaccination mandate. And so we had just a handful, and they had to propose to me in advance, the rationale of why they didn't want to get vaccinated. We did have a couple staff members early on that were honestly, it's their choice, but they were like, I don't even like the mask. And I was like, you know what? I get that. You can have that position, but this is how we're doing it. And you have to basically abide by our policies and our protocol. And, one person in particular said, yeah, maybe I'll see you in 2022 or 2023. It's a good volunteer too. Somebody that has a really positive attitude, been really good with the kids, really liked amongst the staff, but just that was their personal choice. So again, you can kind of do the math. Out of roughly 60 volunteers, about 5.
That's pretty good, Mark. So I'm just curious, those 5, had they had COVID? Were they not wanting to get vaccinated because they said they had a natural immunity? That's what I'm running into right now.
Yes,
So I'm just curious.
Like one exception that I granted is I had a very, and this is a gal that works in Oregon procurement. She's very sharp cookie, very high within the flow chart of that particular company, but she was first term pregnancy, roughly around 7-8 weeks in. And, she'd gotten some advice that if she could forego getting the vaccination, so she wasn't truly one of those personalities that was like, this is fabricated by blah, 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 whatever. She just was trying to be as thoughtful and cautious as she could. And to me, it made a lot of sense with the other things that we were having them do with the PCR in advance, the PCR on site. We're kind of creating our bubble. That felt like a warranted exception to the rule. And so really in all 5 of those cases, the narrative or storyline felt like right along those lines. It was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I could see, especially if you're getting just even a little bit of conflicting narrative from your OB doctor that's saying, I believe in the science, but let's be safe with this, till you come to term and deliver your child and not have any regrets.
Sure. Did you have any that were saying that they'd had COVID and wanted, believe that their immunity naturally was good to go?
I don't think so. No, not on the staff level. No, we did have some children that had COVID leading right up to camp.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like matter. Wow. Yeah. So I mean, and sadly enough, I'll share something that maybe isn't in your protocol, but something to be aware of. So we had a long time operational staff member at camp. He of course was vaccinated, everything, but his wife contracted COVID and he had to leave. She's still at a point where she's likely to survive, but is touch and go. When he's driving back up to Fort Wayne of whether she was going to survive the next 24 to 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it's not something I thought about too much about what would happen if a staff member had something like that happen. we were insulated. You know, we were insulated in all of our departments. But yeah, it was, you know, even morale wise, it didn't really affect. But we love our people, right? I mean, we're more than just connected as volunteers for a week of camp and otherwise. So it was tricky, you know, with Scott in particular.
Yeah. So one more question following up to that, and it's something that what you just said triggered something that I know is not in my protocol necessarily, or not maybe strong enough. And that is, you know, once the parents drop the kids off, you know, let's just say they get home and one of them starts feeling ill, or, you know, even a staff member's family starts feeling ill and contacts them and tells them that they're off to get a test. To me, that needs to be reported back to our medical team and probably that person quarantined. So I'm going to go make some revisions, thanks to you.
Right,
on my wording.
Another thing we did discover is we did daily temperature checks, and we had a boy about, was it Wednesday, Abby? Yeah, I think it was Wednesday. So for us, that would have been, you know, at least 2-3 days into our camp program. And his temperature, we did him once in the morning for each cabin. And beyond that, you know, just normal protocol, making certain that they're not symptomatic in any other capacity. So his temperature registered either in the yellow or the red, but he felt fine. So no issues. Feel absolutely great. And so we did end up going into our alternative protocol where he would go into the med center. And it was challenging because we would continually, you know, every 4 hours or so, just keep doing those checks, and his temp just continued to run higher. But he legitimately, it wasn't fake it till you make it. He seemed fine, no issues whatsoever. And we all know in non-COVID years, I mean, that stuff can happen. I mean, we're getting kids and germs and all these fun things in from another community. So we ended up isolating him until the remainder of camp. Gave him choices. Obviously, we're in communication with family from the onset. You know, if anything would have changed as far as, you know, getting considerably worse or definitely had gotten better, you know, we would have taken that information and made decisions from that. Now, there's another boy in his cabin the very last day of camp, which had been a Friday. So again, Wednesday quarantine, Friday into camp, that ended up, he was vomiting. He was sick. So I think it's something viral, non-COVID. But the temperature checks, you know, we would normally have done that. We would not normally in the morning have done that. And so it's just, you can take that information for what it's worth, but it's definitely something that we experienced.
I have a few more questions about the PCR tests.
Yes.
Well, first one is, how long was your camp?
A week.
A week, okay.
Yeah.
And then I think I had to step away from the computer, but how long did it take to get the results back for the immediate ones?
For the you're talking about
the ones you took on campus.
Yes. So we had 2 different sets that we took because our staff come in at a different time than our campers.
Okay.
So we did the first set with our staff. We started on Saturday at roughly 8:30 a.m. and that was, you know, introduction to camp, and in between that, getting your name tag, all that stuff, you know, it's like a check-in. They're getting their PCR test. As soon as we were able to get all this, which didn't take very long, half an hour, 45 minutes, we had a person on site that was not part of our normal camp group running it to the lab, which is about an hour and a half away. When did we end up getting notification for that, Abby? Was it the same day?
Yeah, I think it was, what was it? 11 at. Mm-hmm. I think it was before dinner for sure.
Okay.
But we got those pretty quick.
So we did just a lot of more extra cautious masking protocol until the moment we got those results back, but the same day, you know, we were able to get it back same day. So that was positive. And then with the campers, they checked in on Sunday, roughly around 2 o'clock. And so we didn't get the results back until, I think that we weren't supposed to get them back till like 6:30 or 7 in the morning, like right when the lab first opened. on that Monday. And again, it's Memorial Day. It's a holiday. So there's some extra challenges for us with the dates of our camp. But one of the lab personnel was very empathetic to our cause and told one of our medical professionals that he would personally see it through and get us an answer that night. And I think it was sometime before midnight that we ended up getting word back. So, and I told all of my staff, because we had breakfast that next morning, that was community breakfast. We did dinner just at their cabins, box lunch kind of situation. And I said to all of our staff in the cabins, I said, you plan on coming to breakfast. Just plan on coming to breakfast unless someone pops by your cabin that says otherwise. So that way we don't need to extra layer our communication and go like, you are clear and you're clear and you're just assume you're good until otherwise. So everybody was able to come and we were good to go. So that's kind of the timeline with the PCR. Now the rapid is different, as JD, could reference, like you're going to get a result back. But the only challenge with the rapid, you just make that choice with whatever's good with you, is that I have heard and kind of seen the numbers that sometimes it's just not as reliable. But I think, again, if you had done one in advance and you do one on site, you can always redo it again. Whatever works best for your respective area.
So that's why we decided to go with the rapid test, was because it does have a 15 minutes turnaround. And we do understand that the numbers might not be as good as the PCR, but we also have some we have a lot of rural children from Montana and Idaho and places like that wouldn't let us PCR test their kids because the rapid is just like a nasal swab. It's not invasive. And right now I have not had anybody tell me we can't test their kids.
For our summer teen adventure trip, we're going rapid. We made that determination. Now we're going to ask them to do it again in advance to arrival, and then we'll do rapid again on site, smaller group. But that choice is the choice we made for this trip coming up this next week.
Yeah. It was definitely for us, it was a turnaround concern. Yeah, and like Mark was saying, you guys had to do like box lunches in the cabins and things like that. So, so I've seen a couple of questions about learning about hesitations coming back to camp. So maybe hesitations from staff and maybe hesitations from campers or camper families not wanting to send their kids. Did you guys run into any of that?
From staff, no. Other than those aforementioned couple of folks that just didn't align with our protocol and kind of our goals for this version of camp. I would say, again, staff were legitimately rock stars. And I think part of that, what helped us a ton, with us is we do two trainings. We have a training that normally takes place in March, but didn't take place until April of this year. And just laying down that ground, the first thing that, we spent time talking about is the fact that you might disagree with some of the things that we're doing. And let's be real honest, even as camp professionals, for as solid as our protocol is, we're not eliminating risk. We're minimizing
managing
risk.
it. Yeah.
We will not eliminate it. And so if you ride the logic train, which I do often, and I could see people, kind of riding the logic train and they're like, there's some hypocrisy here, or this doesn't seem real solid there. We've all had the internal discussions, right? These are smart people. And so I didn't want to dumb down my audience and say, listen, you might do that and be like, but what about this? I said, and those are conversations I'm not afraid of. I welcome that feedback so that we can get it as right as we can. But what I want you to do is if you're troubled with it and we don't have the solution that you're seeking, you got to be a good soldier. We all in life have things within our jobs, even within our families, that we're like, I don't really like it. Like when my kids were in 8th grade and they were in band, as much as I love my kids, watching an hour and a half band performance with all of them playing the instruments terribly, even waiting for my kid to play. It's like, you know what, I signed up to be a dad. So great band performance says, suck it up, Buttercup. You're just going to sit through it and you're going to tell him he was brilliant at the end of it, you know?
Right.
So this is an instance where you just got to do right, you know, by the organization and everything that they're trying to do to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's imperative for the culture of your group. And the other thing
Absolutely.
and the other thing I said to him too is like, go through a COVID conversation, try to go 24 hours without talking about it. 24, good luck. Because it's now the how's the weather kind of conversation.
It
And
is.
let's limit it. Let's talk about it. Let's train about it, but then let's leave it behind. Like of the 10 other conversations you can have with anybody else, that's one you don't need to have. It's not like we're excommunicating it from our society, but let's focus on so many other great conversations that can take place. So.
Coop, I really appreciate that perspective because I think it really reminds me about how we talk about even just like how we approach safety with like child sex abuse. Like it makes me think about all these other topics that we talk about, that it's like, this is just one thing now that we're going to add to our list of things.
Yes.
And I think that I think what hopefully we can do in this conversation, I hope what we can help camps do in the future is to really phrase it in that way. Because when you think about it, it's like, hey, we have a no cell phone policy that we really ask people to apply to. Do they always listen to it? No, they don't. And like the same way about a masking policy, like this is our policy. We might have to remind you about it, but this is just one of the things that we're doing.
Yes.
And so I think that just makes so much sense to me. I really appreciate you like saying it in that way, because I think that can help people who are hesitant, because I think we all are. You've been in that conversation where you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do this right now, you know, like, but I think I just really appreciate the perspective of like, it's okay if you don't agree, but it's just like, it's okay if you don't want to not wear a shirt with a cuss word on it. You know, it's like, you can wear your shirts, you just can't wear them here. So pick what you're going to do.
So go ahead, Mark.
I say our camp is a Christian camp. And so they have like, obviously things that are all over the place representing the YMCA. We're not a religious based organization, but I'll even say, you know, if the camp staff lead, you know, a song on the grace board ahead of time, I'm not expecting people to convert to Christianity on the spot, but it's a product of the environment. Just don't sing it if you don't want to do it.
Yeah, you know? Don't sing it. So, yeah, so I think I love that perspective, and I've used that with my staff and with a couple of my families, and I've tried to just say, you know, last year was hard on everybody, you know, going virtual, you know, and not being able to see each other in person and, you know, have that community. And I said, do you want to do that again? And everybody was like, no. Well, great. Here's our opportunity to get back together. And here's what we have to do in order to do it. And I said, I don't want to be that camp director that ends up on the news, you know? And everybody goes, oh yeah, that's probably not a good idea. A couple of our challenges have been on both sides.
Yes.
So I've got families, like I have an Indian family who have lost a number of their family members in India and who are scared to death to send their child to camp. And it took a long conversation telling them about all of the protocols that we'll have in place to keep their son safe.
Right.
And then on the flip side, I've got these, you know, kids and families from rural places that, you know, don't see why we have to have any protocols in place.
Yeah. And so, that conversation I had with that one family, JD, it was honestly about an hour in the office, and Abby and Valerie were just listening to me talk through it. And there was anxiety on the parental side, because this would be something else that I think would truly help the group. We send out more stuff than we normally send out. So families are inundated with just a lot more information than they normally have. In this particular family's case, you know, they're reading all of that stuff. JD saying, you know, we got to protect ourselves, we got to do what's right, protect the brand, protect the community, protect our volunteers, yada, yada. But it created even more anxiety in this parent's mind, in the child's mind. So I'm on the phone with both of them. And I basically am doing my best to defuse the bomb by basically saying, camp's going to still be camp, you know, because Austin's, I mean, he's legitimately running through the itinerary Sunday through Friday. And he's like, will we still have flagpole and sing songs? I'm like, yes, we will. Will it be different? Well, we might have people in pods and it'll be a little bit different, but you're going to have fun. This is going to be good. This is going to be a great week. Will we still do this? I mean, he had the whole list of everything, of whether it was still going to happen, not going to happen, you know, what the changes are. And I think that the biggest takeaway from the conversation that I try to tell him is that, listen, you're going to see so much stuff that's going to almost make you feel like it's not going to be camp. But what you need to realize is that it's like Mackenzie said, it's just one little piece, you know, some modifications. But for the most part, the people are going to be the same, and the experience is going to be the same. And by the end of the conversation, they felt comforted. They felt like, okay, I guess I will show up when transportation comes to pick me up and come to camp.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that Kristen has run River Camp, and Michelle has run the family camp. I'd like to hear from each of you guys, you know, challenges, successes, maybe some of the same as Mark and Abby, some different, you know, so Michelle, why don't you go first and let us know how things went and all that good stuff.
Sure. And I would like to start off by introducing, we've got a new member of our aftercare team, and Chelsea Hendricks joining the call there. Yes.
Hey.
So she was hired just a couple of weeks before family camp, so she got to jump right in. And family camp went really good for us. It was very, very different this year. So we did a timeline swap. We normally have our big kids camp in May and our family camp in September. And then it just kind of dawned on me, well, hey, a family's kind of already a bubble. So we swapped them so that we could just put a family per cabin. Normally we have more folks than that. We have families that share cabins. So that was the first thing that we did, was we kind of spaced them out more, one family per cabin. And then we pretty much did a whole lot of alterations too, like having all of our meals outside, all that kind of thing. So we just scrapped anything that would normally happen inside. We had basically an outside dining hall. So we just rented a ton of tables, and our camp partners had been running that sort of scenario. That's what they've been doing, is scrapping the inside dining hall. So they were really comfortable with running it that way. And it worked out great, really. I guess that was the biggest surprise, was how well it worked. It was a phenomenal weekend. So our numbers were down, but everybody was really pleased. The weather cooperated, so that just made it go a long ways. But it really had a very, very relaxed feel to it overall. You know, we were able to have our tables spaced out enough that when, you know, masks came off for eating and all that kind of stuff, that everybody felt comfortable with it. There was a nice breeze in the area, all of that sort of thing. And we were really comfortable with our camp partners. They're also a YMCA camp, and in our area, they're pretty much the leader for delivering safe childcare. And they jumped right into that as soon as schools closed and all of that sort of thing. So we're really comfortable with them and how they had everything set up and how on top of the policies and everything that they were. So we really were able to run pretty much our normal camp experience, just kind of at half capacity, so to speak. Now, since it was family camp, we did not do any testing before they arrived or anything. We did have them fill out sort of symptom tracker form for 2 weeks prior to camp. That's in line with what our YMCA camp partner does. And we did, that was temperature checks and symptoms and all that sort of stuff. And we definitely did temperature checks upon arrival, and a lot of guidelines for what to do during camp if somebody wasn't feeling good, you know, that sort of thing. But otherwise, it really just pretty much looked like a regular camp for us. You know, we kind of weren't able to use as many of our community volunteers as we're used to using with different things, like having them cook meals for us and the firefighter involvement and that sort of thing. So that part felt a little bit different to the folks behind the scenes that know what, you know, grand scale family camp looks like. But for the participants themselves, they didn't really know the difference. So the biggest thing that was new for us this year was actually, I'm happy to say, not COVID related at all. We had for the first time some adult survivors of burns that had kids that were really impacted by their burns. We have had one adult who'd been burned for many, many years come to camp before, but this was different to have two females with fresh burns. And so the adult survivors and husbands and kids were all able to bond. And so that was a new element to our camp, and that worked out really, really well. So I'm pretty sure we'll do more of that and not just limit it to having a pediatric burn survivor.
Awesome.
I'll jump out now. You're welcome to ask any questions.
I have a question. So, sorry, it took me a moment to unmute there. So we're planning our family camp all the way in November, but we usually kind of run it as 3 parallel programs with the parents in one group, the burn survivors in another, and the siblings in a third. So what we're already planning is to do the cabins, just like you've described, but we're to the point where I haven't fully thought this through because I'm focused on our summer camp, which is going to be virtual next month, but trying to figure out how we're going to intermingle our groups like we usually would, because it's all good to have them in their pods for sleeping, but the whole rest of the point of camp is to intermix all the families.
Right. So Valerie, I don't know about California, but I know that right now I feel like rules, guidelines, and restrictions are a moving target for me.
It changed so much.
I know, and people keep asking me, and I'm like, well, here's how it is today, but in 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever, that may change. And so I think that if you're running this in November, you're going to run up against the same thing. You're going to have a lot of changes between now and then, as far as, the state being open and what the CDC is recommending for camps and all of those things. So
right. And we've been purposely vague in our applications, just saying we'll follow CDC guidelines and things like that. But I'm mostly just not sure what I'm going to do for the activities where people would normally just be close and together. And in November, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cold out. So
right.
It's not going to be very feasible to do a lot of stuff outdoors.
Yeah.
We did still sort of kind of that cohort mentality or cohort thinking, so to speak, so that we had a couple of cabins and they were still kind of their cohort. So anything that we did where they were mixing it all, it was always so it wasn't ideal per se in terms of mixing the way we normally would and letting people kind of mix up organically and that sort of stuff. It was kind of, these 3 families are going together when they do place things, and these 3 families and these 3 families. So we still kind of had that cohort style thinking as they did their rotations and so forth.
I guess I should have asked how big your camp is. Ours is pretty small for the family camp. It's usually 10 families or fewer.
Oh, and that's what we had this year, actually,
Okay.
10 families. We usually have 20 to 25, so we were down to about 10. And the other thing that it really impacted for us was support groups, because we do normally take time during family camp and have adults and the survivors and the siblings in different support groups, but we just really had concerns about it being too much mixing when everything else was safely kind of separated and cohorted. So we didn't do that. We went to more of almost like a Phoenix Society open mic kind of style at some of our meals, and that worked to an extent. We certainly heard from a lot of the parents and a lot of families that they really, well, the parents especially, way more than the kids. We didn't hear it from the kids. We heard it from the parents that they really missed that support group opportunity and really wanted that to happen. So that if we're under these same kind of precautions, we'll definitely figure out a different way to do that. But that I would have to say would have been our biggest miss. And it kind of does go along with that, the precautions that we had to do just to let camp even happen.
Right.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions for Michelle and family camp, running a family camp? Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left. And so Kristen,
I can jump in. So
Thank
one
you.
thing I was going to say, Valerie, I've had a couple of conversations with the director of infectious disease at the University of Utah Hospital. And one thing she said, because I was like, what about for having kids from out of state? Or what about this? What about that? And she was like, really check the positivity rates in the areas where people are coming from. If the rates are low, your sphincter level can maybe be a little lower. If the rates are high where people are coming from, she said, then you need to like put in some extra, layers. So I thought that was just a good reminder. And then also really keeping in mind the CDC's updated recommendations, which are available on the ACA website. Mackenzie just posted that link. They're really great. I didn't change my communicable disease plan for the river trip based on those new recommendations, simply because one, it was such a huge process to get approval that I didn't want to go, oh wait, now we want to change. And two, I felt like our approach was a little stricter than the CDC's current recommendations. So I thought it was probably better to err on the side of strictness. But that said, there were a few things. I then, the adolescent river trip, we're pretty blessed that it, aside from the bus ride, it is 100% outside. And I got individual tents. So when the kids did sleep in tents, usually they just like to sleep outside on a tarp. But when they did sleep in tents, they were all in their own individual tent. And so that, usually we have 3 in a tent and then the adult just outside the tent. And so we didn't have any group tent sleeping, which I think helped a lot. And I think we're going to keep that. I think that's just going to be our new staple. Because the kids actually, the couple of kids who slept in their personal tent, they said, I just needed some space. And so it was kind of a way for them to just get a little like break from always being around people. So I don't know if that helps, but it was kind of a good reminder for me. So our approach, we use CampDoc for our registration, and CampDoc helped us set up a health screen. So we called everybody 2 weeks before and did a pretty in-depth with each camper health screen questionnaire. And then also did a verbal, these are the things we want you to keep in mind as you're preparing to come live in community with a group outside your family for a week. Don't be a part of like large indoor gatherings, family gatherings with people from out of state. You should really kind of not do that the week before camp. We did not have people quarantined because the U didn't think we could enforce that. And so in not being able to enforce it, they were like, you're actually creating a different liability by asking people to do something that isn't enforceable. So that was kind of the U's approach, which I don't always get their approach, but I have to follow the legal people. And then so we did this really comprehensive, these are things to look for, these are signs and symptoms, these are the best practice for keeping, reducing the risk of getting sick. And, we kind of went through all of that in that call 2 weeks in advance. And then every day after that, they got an email from CampDoc, and they had to just answer some simple questions about their health and kind of any exposure to COVID, and then, enter their temperature, which the temperature check isn't that great of a predictor for COVID, but it's still what people are using. So they did that, and the staff did that every single day leading up to camp. And then the cool thing is that it just got entered into a Excel spreadsheet in CampDoc. So then it was really easy for us to look and see, oh, has anybody answered yes to this? And we had one counselor whose daughter had an exposure, and so we had her wait, 72 hours and then get a COVID, additional COVID test. And then we tested everybody before they even got out of their cars. So we did that rapid test and had everybody stay in their car with their one parent until we got the results of the test. And thankfully, nobody tested positive. That was a huge relief. And then on the bus, we wore masks the whole time. I also kind of assigned seating so that it was an 80-person bus and we had 20 people on it. And so then I had everybody kind of spaced out, alternate rows. And usually the bus ride is a big communal thing, and we do getting to know you activities, and people are kind of like doing, like bingo, person bingo, and, just all of this interactive stuff. And we pulled back on that, obviously, and spaced out seating. And then we did some of those activities when we were outside. So that was definitely a different feel. So we didn't start out camp like, oh, immediately I know all these things about you, which is a bummer, but there you go. And then we did the symptoms checklist and temperature every morning on everybody, staff and kids. And again, we are in about as remote an area as you can get in the United States. And so we were pretty careful with that. And it was a smaller group than usual. Usually I can bring 28 people. This year I was only able to bring 20, and that was the BLM and the river company's rules. Yeah, and then we wore masks on the bus ride home, and I got some pushback from kids on that. You know, we've been around each other all week. Why do we have to wear masks now? And I was like, the federal law. It has nothing to do with me. It's a federal law. We don't want to like have there be problems with camp because somebody sees us on the bus without our masks on. And I just kind of did that, you know, we just got to do the thing. And they rolled their eyes, but then mostly wore their masks. And it was a 4-hour bus ride. That there was a wildland fire that closed the main road we were on. So the 4-hour bus ride took 8.5 hours. It was a long time for them to keep masks on. So I did have some compassion for that. I was feeling it too. And my big takeaway from the week was the kids were hurting this year. They were lonely, they were isolated. Those touch points, those in-person touch points from camp, they didn't have throughout, you know, the year in the same way. The virtual camp really didn't hit that mark for the teenagers the way, you know, in-person camp does. Usually we've got lots of structured kind of, you know, like we're on the river and the water was low. So we were on the river for pretty long days. And then we've got, you know, like, okay, we've got the art section and the, you know, this section and this section. And we did a lot more just free play. The kids just needed to play. And these are teenagers, 14 to 17. And they, the relay races that we set up were really just funny and silly, like with you had a pantyhose on your head with the ball in it, and you have to knock over a water bottle, like swinging your head like this with the hose on your head, and then you have to run to that, you know, like we kind of, like I really did scratch a lot of the kind of programming things that we had, because I just was watching these teenagers who needed to play. I did have one teenager have some kind of suicidal conversation with another kid kind of last night, sort of that last night of camp thing, but is, you know, they were staying up late on the tarp, and he was telling another camper, I've been, you know, thinking about this a lot at home. And immediately in the morning, the other camper came to me and said, I can't hold this. And I'm like, and nor should you. And we had a protocol in place, kind of an assessment tool that we use. And we did a safety plan with him, and I let his mom know, and she wasn't surprised, and you know, had a therapist all lined up to get him an appointment with already. So I mean, it kind of went as well as it could, but that was really my take home, was the kids needed those touch points, and they needed more play than almost anything.
Kristen, I just wanted, you said something that really hit home with me. I couldn't agree more with you, just the sense of belonging and longing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, we see each other, like even on a call like this, and we hear each other, but just touch, just human contact and touch has been what a lot of folks have been robbed from.
Right.
Because even with masks, it's kind of like keep your distance, right? Stay away from that thing. But the other thing, I don't know if this is just a curiosity for me. We've seen that in the past with a lot of kids at the end of camp. Of course, it's emotional because you connect
right.
with
it's hard to leave. It's hard to go back to the thing that maybe it doesn't feel so belonging.
That's exactly it. I think on a psychosocial level, it's been interesting for me because some kids are just sad, of course, and then they'll move on to the next thing. I think some others, the euphoric high of that experience of being with one another is it's like a drug. I mean, it's a hard thing to replicate.
Right.
And the emotional low that happens, the few days or the few weeks afterwards. It's just a fascinating thing to think about. It's something that I would love to see a little more, if we can measure that. I don't know how you measure it, but
Right.
I don't want to dominate conversation with it, but we've actually seen one boy in particular that, due to the emotional loss, was hospitalized, made an attempt. And I think it's because he just didn't have that community that support. So
I've gotten emails from several parents after camp just kind of saying, I'd underestimated how much they needed that community, that how much I didn't realize how much they missed this last year. And that was, I think, really telling too. Just how much they need those connections and those, the adults who offer a relationship in a different way than maybe, what they have at home or what they have at school. And the adults who are willing to just play with them. And that's just different than what parents, in any type of family system, parents can't always spend like the whole day playing. And
or any of it for that matter.
Right. And so it just is a different, but and that also that piece of, the body image piece. And I had campers who were burned shortly before COVID and, went home right kind of a month or so before COVID. And then you're wearing a mask everywhere. And so, it's been 1.5 years, almost 2, since one kid with a very large injury was out of the hospital, but he was just now having the scars on his face visible to others because the mask, he wasn't super compliant with wearing his pressure garment mask, but he was really great at wearing his COVID mask because he felt like it was like everybody else.
Yeah. That's a good one, Kristen. So I think we could probably sit here and talk the rest of the afternoon, but I do want to honor everybody's schedules because most of you are still working folks. I did see an idea, I think it was from Mackenzie, to add this particular part of the discussion to the workshop. And that is a great segue because that's what I want to talk about for just a few minutes. If you have not seen the save the dates information on Facebook or from the website, please mark your calendars for August 27th to August 30th. The workshop will be outside of Chicago. We are at a resort this year, not a camp facility. It will be hosted by the Illinois Burn Camp, and those folks are, they tried to get their camp facility, but unfortunately it was unavailable. So we'll be up there for 3 days. We are working on the registration form and hopefully we'll have that knocked out within a week or so. And we are asking that you concentrate on who you bring to the workshop to be your camp leadership team, your director, your activity staff directors, your program level team, because we are going to be focusing our agenda and our topics more toward that this year than just your overall camp activities. Now, we'll certainly have those, but they'll be, the topics will really be looking, focused on your director level folks. Any questions about that before we knock off for the day? Anything you want to add, Kristen or Madeline?
If you guys could really spread the word about the IABC workshop and the setting, I think it's going to be really interesting. It was a place that was special to Dottie, and it was the place that she wanted it held there. And so it's maybe a little outside the norm of what the IABC workshop usually is. But it really was Dottie's wish to hold it there. And unfortunately she, wasn't able to see that through. But Chris, from Illinois is really working hard to, honor that. And I think honestly, it's going to give us some space to really, as directors, as program coordinators, as activity coordinators, kind of as those people in the leadership roles, to really kind of just regroup and share our policies. And we're going to have sort of different types of speakers come in. Maddie and Mackenzie are really heading up our education kind of group, and they're really looking at who can bring kind of some of those topics that are hard to talk about, but the world is changing and we all need to have an increased awareness of them. So I think it's going to be a little different than the normal workshop, but I think it's going to really hit an important mark. So yeah, so spread the word. Lots of folks aren't able to be here today. I think lots of people are in the midst of running camp or trying to squeeze in a vacation before or after camp. And
you guys say, is there a cap for numbers for it from each location?
No, I mean, we've gone back and forth. I think it's really just more thinking, sometimes we all send the people who are like those couple of counselors that are just super great, or we're looking at maybe not, we're trying to just keep it to the leadership group. But yeah.
I think that's what we were thinking too, but I thought I heard through the grapevine or for somebody at one point in time that you guys were going to create like a 2 people per camp or a 3 person per camp or something like that. I don't know.
We've played with that idea, but I think ultimately each room holds 2 people. You can fit 4 in them, but you save like $10.
Right.
So it's not,
Right.
So it's so it's 1 or 2 people per room. And so I think it's, I mean, we've looked at limiting it just to kind of keep it smaller, but I think that's going to sort of organically happen.
Right.
And I think the really big camps or the camps with lots of programs probably have more people in leadership positions than like my program. So I think that's kind of
Gotcha.
what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And also we're trying to just be cognizant of the idea that people weren't able to do all the fundraising that they normally get to do. So camps may not have the ability to send 15 people
Right.
this year.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so more information, certainly coming out shortly on that. And I can't wait to see all of you in person. But I just read something, Abby, that you put in there about the spontaneous hugs and physical contacts. So can you say a little bit more about that? Because I can't imagine that it's not going to happen. I mean, especially, after 2 years not seeing each other.
Yeah, no, it was, like I said, it was something that kind of surprised me that I was unexpected by. There's one camper in particular who I'm thinking of who just right away runs up and he wants to hang on me, and he wants to hang on everybody and give hugs. And it was so strange because I was like, I didn't want to armbar him or something or what, and I'm kind of like trying to move and do the side hug kind of thing, but I'm like, am I too close now? And just worrying like how I come across to that camper or others, in that moment too. And it was just something that, I don't think we really talked about at staff training, and that maybe folks who still have that coming up, it might just be something to just have a discussion about, like, what are the expectations, and, just be prepared for it even. But because like I said, it really just surprised. It was something I hadn't thought about or prepared for. So
Yeah,
but that
so
conversation, you guys brought that up. So
yeah, can I ask you a couple of questions about that? Because I know my kids, I know it's going to happen. And so did you guys do any talking to the campers about that? When you first got them in their cabins, did you discourage it? I'm sure you didn't encourage it, but how did that go at all?
Mind if I answer that, Abby? So we did cover it during staff training. It was one of those topics where it felt honestly as clear as mud. One of the things that I said to our staff, especially when they first came in, is that we didn't want to as difficult as it was, let's wait until we get the PCR testing back. The PCR testing comes back and it's negative again, then it just creates a different layer of community, even from a masking standpoint or even from a hugging or a physical contact. We were able to limit everything through check-in because we did like Kristen did. We didn't have people exit the vehicle other than just the campers to do the PCR testing, lice check. We debated doing all of that in the vehicle, but came to the conclusion that we would just let the campers out and the adults stayed in the vehicle the whole time. And so during opening, it wasn't kind of a natural free-for-all like it normally was. So we kind of avoided that. And as soon as the campers went down in their vehicle after they checked in, they were dropped off at their cabin. So now they're just in a cabin group. So, you know, if we had to do anything from a contact tracing. And so camp basically operated in that vacuum until the next morning at breakfast. So the next morning at breakfast was the first time where anybody could be together in a large community. Across the board with my staff, they were like, we love check-in. It was efficient. It was just streamlined in a new way. Can we keep that? You know, a lot of my response was, yeah, we'll cannibalize the parts we like. We'll look at the other parts that maybe didn't work. The camper perspective was they missed the normal check-in, because the normal check-in, you get to see everybody and hug everybody and do all those kind of things. So I felt like once we got the testing back, it just created a different level of exposure and the opportunity. And we didn't limit. I mean, we had good touch and bad touch like we always do during training. But beyond that, I think touch is important. It's critically important. And so we allowed it, you know, to basically organically take shape and form like it normally would. And I even said during training, you know, like with you know, Abby's even saying, you know, like there's some staff members I'll go up and I'm a hugging kind of guy, just am. So be forewarned when I see you this fall, I'll come in for the hug. If you want to stop me with the handshake, I get that sense, because there might be a very machismo, and I don't mean to gender stereotype, but a machismo firefighter that's like, you know, the hand's out there, and then I realize right off the bat that those are their boundaries. And the same thing applies, I think, with most people you run across. But I guess my advice is, and I know Abby, I've talked a lot. I thought it was cathartic. I thought it was healthy. I felt like we were able to do it and still maintain, as long as you're not hugging for 15 minutes, you know, then the likelihood of transmission outside is minimal. I think the cost benefit is let them do it.
I believe the term you used before all of our staff got there with a very small group was mouth kissing.
No mouth.
I did say that. I said, as long as you're not mouth kissing, but I said that to the staff that would find humor in that. So please don't judge me.
Oh, Coop. Yeah. You know, I love you, my friend. So,
Yes, we all love each other, but I think mouth kissing is just crossing the line. So
okay.
15 minute hugs are a little creepy too.
Yeah.
So
No.
this is being recorded.
I like to know that, you know, there's standards that are set.
Yeah. I'm not fond of that.
One.
Yeah, I'm not fond of that even with some of my closest friends. Don't do that.
It was a very small group of intimate staff.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But not too intimate. So
Are we going to have to set that boundary for the workshop too? Please no mouth kissing.
I think we set that right now. Let's just all
Sorry,
agree.
but everyone's an adult, so it's everything changes.
Yeah, and if libations and Tom Flam's on this phone call, you know,
Oh,
Tom
hey,
Flam's
gonna
Tom's going to want to mouth kiss you. You just know it's going to
actually,
happen.
Flam's on the phone. He's with us. So.
Well, it only took me 3 dials to get in. I couldn't get on the computer, so I've been listening intently to all of the important discussion, and I wanted to thank Coop. You know, we chatted for about 45 minutes the Monday after he finished camp, which I know he was still recuperating. So I appreciate all of that, and I'm going to let everyone know who's on the phone. We had intended to send out an email today, but at 3:15 yesterday afternoon, I found out that we were not working today officially. So We will have an update on camp if Kristen has not mentioned anything regarding camp.
I have not,
The
Tom.
IAFF camp. Okay, well, then since you've all taken time out of your busy days schedule and some of you on a holiday, we will be postponing IAFF camp this year and will not be holding it until 2022. I will let you know that much like what we tried to do this year in raising the age, so based on no fault of a young person's making, that they would still be able to attend camp. And I do have a couple of thoughts that I'm going to be proposing to my superiors and the possibilities of how we may be able to make it up to everyone, at least at the camper level. We're not sure if it's something we would be able to extend to the counselor accompanying the camper, but we are working on a couple of things which you will probably find out in a not too distant future. But camp is officially canceled. I'm not going to make excuses. My recommendation got to the point where with the Canadian border being closed and a number of other things which you guys all dealt with, I was just not completely positive that we could ensure the safety of everyone to the level that organizationally we needed to have it at. It's not an excuse or double talk. It's just, that's what the decision was. And our general president said that, he wants to make sure that none of the kids suffer and that we make it up to the kids. So, that's kind of what I got back from our new general president. And I just figured, since some of you who are camp directors and or your camp echelon are on the phone, I would tell you on this call. So I talked way too long. So that's it.
Hey, Tom, thanks for sharing that information. I just texted you, and I really am sorry for all of you, and obviously for the kids. And if you, if you guys want any ideas on how you might be able to, make that up or whatever you were saying, our group is always here for you. And maybe at the workshop we could, have some conversation around that if folks have any brilliance to share around that. So
yeah, and I was going to share this with staff. Kristen won't tell anybody because she's generally very quiet and shy.
Yeah, right.
I already have said that what I would like to propose is that next year we invite 2 campers from half the camps, and the year following we would invite the other half to bring 2 campers with. Again, some of you people have attended our camp. We don't have the amount of space at our camp to be able to have 2 counselors and 2 campers. So we'd be looking at maybe anywhere from 40 to 50 additional people, but we should be able to at least have 2 campers. So, that's one of the things that I've proposed already, and it's early. But yeah, if anybody has any thoughts or, August is kind of far off. I just found out that I'm probably not going to be in Chicago at that time, and would have to come back and then probably fly from here to New York for something else that we're doing. So, but yeah, listen, if anybody has any ideas, I'm all ears.
Absolutely.
Tom, I've said this before. I think that we are all having to make really hard decisions, and the safety and equitability of for campers and staff has to be paramount. And every single program has different variables to weigh.
Yeah.
We talked about thinking about the positivity rate in the area where you're from. Well, your area is 50 states and Canada.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like every single one of us has different, like, you can't go, oh, well, what worked in Utah will absolutely work in Georgia, because the situation is a little like we're just all in a really hard situation, and I think we're all making the best choices we can with the information we have.
Yeah, and like I say, if it was just emotionally, I really need to do this, or the kids really need this, that would be an easy decision to make. But as a more mature individual whose father drilled him on common sense quite often when he was younger, it was list the pros and cons. Well, the cons so far outweighed the pros that while I'm disappointed, I still will, I can certainly live with this decision and believe it's the right one, for staff and the people we would be inviting to camp. So, I have no problem with the decision that got made.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Tom. And but I know how much you guys look forward to that. Luckily, we have not said anything to the campers that we had chosen, nor the staff member. So I don't have to go pull it back now. Anyway, so thank you everybody for joining the call today. Abby and Coop had to fly the coop for another meeting, but we'll reach out to them and let them know how much we appreciate their time. Really appreciate everybody who shared today, and again, shared the information about the workshop. Really looking forward to seeing you all there. It's going to be a really good one, and we are excited to host. And you'll be seeing another Eventbrite for July. I'm not sure what the topic will be yet. We have one, Mackenzie and Madeline, not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
This conversation for me was really robust, and I think it might be some type of a continuation on this. Like, what are people doing well, and how are they making decisions? But I think that we will definitely keep our ears to the ground to figure out what
Absolutely. Yep. I won't be at the July webinar because that'll be the last Friday of our camp. But I'll certainly be watching the recording afterwards and thinking about you guys. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. All right.
Thank you, guys. Take care, all. And
Take care.
if there's any fathers still on the call, happy Father's Day.
Oh, and
Thanks,
hey,
Tom.
and to you, Mr. Flam.
Yeah, I got a few of those. You guys take care.
All right. Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye-bye. Mackenzie, get on the stick. Get that topic done.